Hi, Jim. Are we good to go on live streaming?
Yep, you're live.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you so much. So we're going to go ahead and get started. We're going to go a little bit faster through our normal slides today just so we can get to the group work. And so we do want to thank you all so much for being here today for our October 27, 2021 Advancement and Development Subcommittee. If you can go to the next slide, please. So to begin, you all received the agenda and the minutes from the last meeting and the email provided from Kim that came to your email box earlier this week. So if I could please get someone to make a motion to approve the agenda for the meeting for today.
Don Phipps makes a motion.
Thank you. And if I could please get someone to second that.
Second, Dee Grissett.
Okay. All those in favor of the agenda for today's meeting, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Thank you. Anyone opposed? Thank you. The motion carries and the agenda is approved for today's meeting. Then if we could please get someone to make a motion to approve the minutes from our September 29th meeting from last month.
Motion to approve, Don Phipps.
Thank you. If I get a second, please.
Second, Jill Hamnitz.
Thank you. Are there, if we could please have everyone vote aye who is in favor of the minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Anyone opposed? Great. So the minutes from the September 29, 2021 meeting are approved. Thank you very much. So today we are going to be continuing our work that we've been working on for the past several months. We took all of the recommendations that came out of our last two meetings, where we really dove deep into how the existing standards may align to the competencies that we would expect to see at the various levels for our new licensure system. And we're going to be looking at those specifically today in some breakout groups to really kind of hone in on what do we think the specific competencies should be and what do we think would be the things that we really want to focus on for each one of those levels. Now, I literally took the information from those Excel sheets that you've been working on, and I just translated them into a Google Sheet. We just thought that might be a little bit easier for everyone to access and for us to make some changes. So we're going to be working in Google Sheets today. I tried to capture all of the notes that you would put on those spreadsheets. I also tried to capture all of the discussion that we had in the whole group if someone mentioned something or if there was an idea. But this is by no means a final product. So as you move into your small groups today, what we would really love to see happen is that you take those recommendations that are in each one of the licensure levels. If you feel like I place something in level 2 that needs to be at level 3, by all means, please feel free to move that from one sheet to another. If you have a question about, where something should be, you can highlight it, put a note, something to let us know, hey, I'm not sure if this really belongs in 3, or maybe it needs to be broken up into 2 pieces and move between 3 and 4. So please use this as a living document where you are making changes and where you are looking at different ideas that your group has of where these different competencies should fall. In addition to that, this is by no means the end list of the competencies that we expect that will come out of the recommendations of our subcommittee. So if there are things that you think need to be added to the licensure level that you're working in, please add those. If it's something that comes just from your group's discussion, no problem. But if it's something that you're pulling from a source document, like I know in our last meeting, Melissa had some recommendations on some source documents where she thought there might be some really great information that we could pull and use as competencies. If you're pulling from something like that, please be sure in the last column where it says source of recommendation to either provide a link or the name of the document or something so that I'm able to see where we got that information. So as we finish our final product, we know how to reference any materials that we are using and forming our competencies. Okay, so I am going to put the link to the Google folder into the chat box. In that Google folder, you will see the instruction slides again. So if you needed to go back and look to see what you need to do, you can access that instruction slide. One thing I did change just to make it a little bit easier is I have already given you group 1, 2, 3, and 4 spreadsheets. So you don't need to actually go in and make the copy. You already have a spreadsheet existing there for you. So you just click on your spreadsheet and go ahead and start working. We are going to do 2 breakout sessions. The first session will last for about 35 minutes. And in that session, you're going to be working on tabs 2, 3, and 4. So we are not going to work on level 1 because that would be our learning permit level. And so those competencies there's not going to be a lot of meat in those competencies. So we really want to focus on 2, 3, and 4. So you're going to start with those beginning teachers, then moving into what would currently be the fully licensed SP2 teacher in 2, 3, and 4. We'll come back to whole group for about 20 minutes, and then we will go back to your same spreadsheet, and your team will work on levels 5 and 6. You will notice that on the spreadsheet, you do have some check boxes where it says measurable and impact on students. And if you'll recall from our previous meetings, this is something that we have talked about pretty extensively, that in our work, we must ensure that everything is measurable and has a direct impact on students. And so as you're working through these competencies, if you could please check mark if you think there's a way that that would be measurable, or if you think that this would show impact on students. If you think there's a competency that's been identified already that is either not measurable or does not have impact on students, just don't check mark it. Okay, so that's kind of a way for us to evaluate, are we meeting our requirements and determining and developing a list of competencies that are both measurable and have impact on students. The license description and the license level responsibilities, I just pulled those off of the Human Capital Roundtable diagram that we've been using as our reference. It's the one that has those columns. So that's just kind of to be a reminder for you as you go through your work of what's expected at each one of those different levels. So if you have any questions about those or where those requirements or descriptions came from, it's just off that diagram that we have been using. Is there anyone that has any questions about what we will be working on today or what you're going to be doing as we go into our first breakout group?
Hi, Maureen. This is Melissa Tooley. Thank you so much for that overview. That makes a lot of sense to me. I did just want to clarify. So on the source of recommendation, we're asking everyone to do that as best they can because we're trying to draw on evidence, or you only want that like if I don't know, I guess I'm thinking like there might be things where we might need to like come back to a source, but I think what you're saying is that the goal should be that there is some like evidence for this somewhere and that we're trying to note that. And then I guess I'm just wondering if like in real time, we'll all know the sources of those things or whether that's something we can like flag and then kind of have as like homework to come back to if people don't know the source off the top of their head.
Absolutely. That's definitely something we can flag and come back to. Really what I want that there for is when we develop this final document, if we have used a standard that's nearly identical or a competency that's nearly identical to another source document, I do not want to plagiarize their work. So I want to make sure, so like up to this point, most of the work that's been done has been work that Dr. Sachs, Dr. Mahar, and I have kind of pulled together with Dr. Evans' help. So I already know where I pulled all that information because I've been keeping notes of it. But as you guys start adding in stuff, if you're pulling from source documents that I'm not aware of, I just want to make sure that I have a reference or a way to get back to that document so that we can correctly annotate it and give credit to that in our final product. In addition to that, I agree. We do want everything to be research based, right? And we want to make sure that there's some that we're not doing junk science as we work through this process. And so for that reason, additionally, it is really important that we are making sure that we have references, but really the big point here for me is if you're pulling from something, if you can just give me that source, that way I have that knowledge, and then that way as we move forward, I can have that as a reference. Does that make sense? So really, I would say err on the side of giving me a reference if you can. All right, so I just put the link into the chat box. So if you want to click on that link, that will take you directly to the shared folder. And then Kim will also be putting us into breakout groups. So whichever breakout group you are placed into, if you could just select the spreadsheet that correlates to the number of the group that you are placed into.
Are we good, Maureen? Do you want to start the breakout groups?
Yes, we are good to start the breakout groups. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Ms. Evans,
Yes?
this is Felicia Brown. I'm calling in over the phone.
Okay, would you
I
like
was
to be
just
added to a breakout group?
Yes, I was just leaving a funeral, so
Oh, I'm sorry.
it's okay. So
I
I'm
will
just playing
add
on my
you.
phone.
I will add you to one. Oh, it's not listing you to be able to add you.
Is it because I'm on the phone?
If you had WebEx on the phone, then I could add you, but it's not sensing you for a breakout group.
Okay. All right. I do have it on my phone. How long have they been in breakout groups?
They have another about 21 minutes, so it's worth going in there
Yeah.
if you want to join through WebEx through your phone.
Okay. All right. I'll try that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thanks. All right. Bye-bye. Ms. Evans?
All right, so welcome back to the main room, everyone. I hope everyone had some good discussions in your breakout groups and that you were able to work through some of the different competencies that were there. Again, this is by no means a final list, and so it's a living document. So please feel free to move things around and to give us your feedback on where you think different things need to be placed. So we're going to do a quick share out. So we will begin with group one. So someone from group one would like to unmute and just share kind of a brief overview of what you talked about in your breakout room. Tabari, it looks like you got nominated.
I think Melissa needs to take it. She was the one leading the dialogue. Go ahead and take it, Melissa. I'll help you.
All right. It's really loud here. I don't know if you can hear the noise in the background, but hopefully y'all can hear me. We talked a bit about, we thought that in general, these seem to be the right competencies. We discussed sort of generally whether having it be mastery for all of these was sort of the right level. It says license level responsibilities are to demonstrate mastery of content and pedagogy. And some of these we felt like, yeah, like in particular, the competency around, like using appropriate technology or providing appropriate instructional adjustments to support students with special needs. Like these things are still probably works in progress at this stage. And so there were some things that we sort of talked about wanting to have a, you do really have to sort of have mastery of this at a level 2, and other of these things that maybe the level of that is still a little bit lower than mastery. And so we weren't exactly sure how to necessarily tweak the language to do that, and didn't really have a tool to do that, but there were just some flags that came up in our conversation. We also noticed that on the provides appropriate instructional adjustments to support students with special needs actually didn't show up in other levels. We're sort of trying to look across different levels to understand what is the progression, like what is the sort of corollary of this in level 3 and level 4, like how is it sort of moving forward, and we actually couldn't find one there because it does feel like a pretty, it's a difficult one for a lot of teachers, and particularly one a little bit earlier, perhaps in their development as an educator. We also talked about like whether there should be a more, there's a couple of competencies that talk about teachers offering evidence that students can demonstrate particular skills, particularly communication, critical thinking, and problem solving in ways that are meaningful and useful to their daily lives. We also talked about whether that adequately captures all teachers and their objectives in their specific subjects and areas. So for example, CTE teachers or physical education teachers might be looking more about sort of application, like the students can actually apply the content taught. Some of those things might be via communication, critical thinking, and problem solving, but not always. And so trying to make sure that there are either an additional competency that is sort of written broadly, or some more specified competencies, I guess, for teachers in specific areas. We also talked about, ultimately wanting to include something here that gets more specifically at cultural relevance. Cultural responsiveness of educators. It looks like in level 3, there is there's a competency that says the teacher uses learning activities that acknowledge the value of human difference and incorporate learning materials that reflect students' cultures and backgrounds. We thought that that was something that actually should be incorporated in level 2. And that in general, there's like a few competencies that sort of seem to go together in that way, sort of recognizing and educating students as individuals with special needs and values and identities, and thinking about how when these are ultimately, down the road put together, that grouping them somehow would be helpful for teachers in sort of understanding, okay, this is like the general standard these are trying to get at, and sort of helping put those together for educators. And others, please jump in. I'm sure I forgot something.
Yeah, I just wanted to definitely echo, and Melissa brought it to my attention. I totally missed it. I've been on this thing for 3 years and I missed it. But when you progress across a rubric and you're coaching teachers like the mentor teachers will be doing, you definitely don't want to create confusion in the candidate that's trying to progress. In our rubric, License 2, Teacher in Residency Skills Development, okay, that was number 2. But then when you go to number 3, Teacher in Residency Skills Advancement, there should be some alignment in the competencies as you progress from left to right. So you'll know what to work on going forward. Somewhat like our current evaluation rubric, the action verbs change as you progress from proficient to distinguished. But there is some alignment. They do throw some at you in distinguished that's not in the proficient role. But again, you're exemplary once you get to that. It's just a suggestion. It's something I just noticed.
Yeah, and thank you so much for all that, Group 1. And absolutely, I agree. And that's discussion that we also had in Group 2. Just to kind of clarify, though, kind of how I set up this spreadsheet for you today. I was trying to be authentic to the work that you have already done as a subcommittee. And so I literally, from those spreadsheets we did, like where you guys went in and you did impact and you did application for each level, I took the information just as you wrote it in those other Excel spreadsheets that we've worked on for the past 2 months and copy and pasted it over to this spreadsheet in each one of those levels. So like if you had put it on the impact worksheet that we did, that got copied on to a level 3. Or if you had done application, it got copied on to where it correlated with what we had talked about in our previous meetings. That is why I said, please feel free to move things around. Please feel free to add things in. So like if you think there needs to be culturally responsive teaching practices in levels 1 through 6, then add that on to all the levels. If you think something needs to be moved, like my group, we actually moved several things that Melissa brought up. We moved them from our spreadsheet level 2 to spreadsheet 3. Because we felt like they did not belong for a level 2 teacher, and they were the same ones that you guys brought up with the 21st century skills and some of the higher level things that would be a little bit more difficult for a level 2 teacher. So this process of working through this spreadsheet is to take all the work we've done from the other 2 meetings that we had for the past 2 months, kind of get it into the format that the new licensure system will be using with the levels, like the different levels, and then take that in the next meeting and kind of really whittle it down and hone it down so that we have a really good idea of what needs to happen at each level. Like Group 1, Andy mentioned that it would be really helpful if we had like a map. So almost kind of like just as Melissa was saying, in level 2, you're going to be doing these things. This is how those build in level 3, level 4, level 5, and so on. So that will definitely be something we'll be working on, as well as actually mapping what happens between curricular levels to make sure we have connections and to make sure that we don't have any competencies that would kind of be floating on their own, where there's not a clear understanding and directive of kind of how we're moving forward to prepare our teachers into that next level. Another thing that came up in the discussions in our group was for some of the different competencies, we would need to maybe look at developing rubrics or portfolios or some way to measure some of the things that are a little bit more difficult to capture. Like, how do you capture that a teacher is treating students kindly? Or how do you capture that a teacher is expressing high expectations for all of their students? So we would need to have some really well-developed products that would enable an administrator or a mentor teacher or a multi-level classroom teacher or whoever is going to be mentoring and helping the teachers in level 2 and level 3 to really give them some great products so they're able to effectively evaluate those teachers. We also had some really good discussion around what would kind of be the difference between a level 2 and a level 3 teacher, and why it's important that we don't collapse those two and kind of make them a single level. Really, most of that was around the support that a level 2 brand new teacher into a classroom really would benefit from, whereas a level 3 teacher who has demonstrated mastery of more of the competencies that were required to be a highly effective teacher, they already have those. And so it would really, really help them to have a lot of support in level 2, and maybe you don't need quite as much support in level 3. So we had some really good discussion around that as well. Did anyone else from group 2 have anything that I missed? Oh yeah, and then Andy did put in the chat there as well. We did talk about the portfolio. Jeff said it was actually in his first year of teaching, like 98, 99, 2000. There was a beginning teacher portfolio that DPI was developing, which ended up not being used. But is there reference to that somewhere, or do we have that document somewhere where we can maybe use it to help us kind of develop some of these different competencies and skills and maybe use it as a metric to measure? And yes, Tom, I agree, you asked the student. Okay, well, if nobody else from group 2 had anything to add, then we can jump to group 3.
This is Robert. So I was kind of the recorder in group 3, and I'll invite any of my colleagues after. I'll do a quick overview of what we talked about, and I'll invite any of them if they want to share, add to, or adjust any of what I share. So much of what we talked about aligns with the things that both Melissa and Maureen have already talked about. We recognize the granular nature of each of these things and the likelihood that we might need to, as Melissa talked about a minute ago, put some clusters together where some of these things that kind of fit together and hang together might become a part of a larger package of competency when this is ultimately put together in its final version. We also, like the other two groups, recognize there's going to need to be some kind of acknowledgement of prerequisites, because we can think of these as the first tab was the lowest level, and the next tab was a little higher, and the next tab was higher still. But if each of these is also unique entry points, we can't have somebody entering at the second level and skip out on those prerequisites. So however we articulate these later as a committee, we're going to need to identify, if you're entering at the first expectation and you work your way or matriculate through all three, then we know you're going to get all three. But if you hit the pathway at the second or the third level, how do we articulate them to make sure that you've backfilled those prerequisite competencies? So very similar to the things that the other groups have also talked about. We approached the list by first reading it, and if we could imagine a behavior, action, or product that we could see to say that the teacher had in fact done that thing, then we marked it as measurable. But we also acknowledged the idea that sometimes that might be, we need to see active instruction. So how might we see that? So in the end, it might be that somebody has to look. It might be that it's a video or some other thing. And we didn't wrestle around with those or try to decide what was the right one. Just if we could imagine one, we said that it was measurable. And then we also used the language and how they were articulated with the verbs and the nouns and how they addressed the students to determine whether we thought they would have impact or not. So I'll invite other members of my group. Is there anything I should have said or that I left out or you'd like to modify? We were a very efficient group, by the way. We just made it through the last one by the hair of our chinny chin chin before we came back to the big group. Thanks, Maureen.
Thank you. All right, and then group 4.
I think the challenge with going last is we have nothing new to add to the conversation. We kind of did the same thing, went through, found some items that we thought should be moved from 2 to 3 or 3 to 2, and then also had some language changes. and we put those in the document, kind of in suggestions over in that right column. And Don or Tom, anything to add? Felicia, anything to add?
This is Tom. I want to respond to Robert's comment. I understand the idea of backfill, but I do think that there were some, in level 2, there were some, what we considered level 3 competencies that probably shouldn't be in level 2, but I could see the need of repeating the base level 2 requirement. But that's kind of logistics. Like if you're applying for a license 3, you have to demonstrate that you've met all the requirements of the license 2. But anyway, we just felt there was some redundancy in the language, and that it wasn't differentiated well enough between level 2 and level 3.
Yeah, thanks for that feedback. And there were actually some that you will see on both the level 2 and the level 3 list that are exactly the same. And that's because they showed up on, as we did the work 2 months ago, when we were working on those initial licensure levels, they showed up on both of those lists as level 2 and level 3 coming out of the subcommittee work. And that's why I copied them both over. Thank you guys all so much for everything that you've done so far. We are going to go back into breakout groups and work on levels, the levels 5 and 6. If you needed to go back and move things, change things, add things in, add comments for the work we did in the last subcommittee or the last breakout, please go ahead and do that. But if you're ready to move on to 5 and 6, please go ahead and jump there. And again, feel free to move things around between the worksheets. Feel free to add notes, change wording, whatever your group thinks is appropriate for each of those competencies. If you want to add competencies, delete competencies, move competencies, whatever you think, where you think things need to be and how they need to be stated, please make sure you do that. You guys have full liberty to change these spreadsheets as much as your group feels that they need to, okay? Also, Kim asked me to remind everyone, and I don't want to forget to do it, so I'm going to do it right now, that Dr. Miller sent out a email about the work pathway. So she did not add it to the PowerPoint, but you should have received that in your email. So if you need any clarification on what that is or more information about it, just let us know and we can make sure you get that.
Maureen, that was actually only sent to co-chairs.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
Never mind. I misread the text message there. I'm sorry. Okay, I will pull that up while we're in the next meeting. And do you want to just put it up on the screen at the very end then, Kim?
Sure. If you would like to present it that way, that is fine. Or if you just want to explain it, either way.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Sorry about that, guys. All right. So, Kim, if you can go ahead and put us into our breakout rooms again, please.
I am just going to move one person to group 4 because we have the fewest number of members in that group.
Okay.
Because a couple members had to leave. So just to even things out.
Okay, no problem. Thank you so much.
Sure.
All right, so welcome back, everyone. So just real quickly, we're gonna do another breakout. We have about 10 minutes left, so we'll go kind of quickly through this. So we're gonna do another quick review of what you talked about in your breakout sessions, any big ideas or highlights that came out of your breakout sessions, and we will start with group 1.
Hi. So we were working on this idea and trying to clarify whether level 5 is truly just about classroom excellence and not necessarily about leading other teachers in a proactive way. Whereas level 6 is both classroom excellence in terms of demonstrated effective teaching and also proactively leading other educators. And so I think first of all, it'd be helpful to just know whether that's sort of a fair assessment. But if so, then there was a lot of language in level 5 about modeling and mentoring that didn't seem appropriate. And that we sort of had a conversation around, well, it's one thing for teachers to sort of be able to model something for peers, should they be asked to. It's another thing for teachers to sort of be out there proactively sort of shopping their practice around and trying to help other people improve. And so again, sort of trying to make this distinction between I have an excellent practice, so sort of here to show it if you want me to, and the sort of more adult leadership focused role of level 6. So we moved a few things to level 6, like around using data, for example, like helping peers use data to make decisions and things like that. But those were sort of the big high level questions and conversations that we had about it. And then again, sort of just honing in more for classroom excellence on the demonstrated really high level classroom practice.
Awesome. Thank you so much, group 1. In group 2, we had a very similar conversation about really trying to define what a level 5 is. So Megan, do you mind kind of giving the overview that you gave us to kind of make sure the whole group understands what the Human Capital Roundtable's vision was for that level 5 teacher?
Sure. And Jeff or other roundtable members jump in. I don't want to just speak for you all myself, but the question had just come up, what did it mean by having on the chart the 3 out of 5 years highly effective teaching? And was there any other kind of differentiation for level 5? And the roundtable, in their discussions about these 2 upper levels of advanced teachers, really researched, talked to many of the districts in the advanced teacher roles and public impact, so on and so forth, and learned about, kind of differentiation between what public impact sort of labels as reach teachers versus those multi-classroom leader or mentor teachers. And that's really where some thinking centered around that. Level 5 could be very customizable, but teachers who are excellent in their practice, excellent in individualizing instruction, they can take on an increased student load, or they could take on content lead with other teachers, take on some PLC leads within the building, be chairs of the department in high school and take on that kind of leadership piece. It could look very different in different districts and schools based on their needs. And then level 6 really centers around, of course, distinct mentorship with a teacher and a few beginning teachers that they spend multiple hours a week with. So a lot of flexibility went into the roundtable's thinking with these 2 roles, but ensuring that there is enough of a starter kind of, standards and requirements that offer continuity for, career advancement across the entire state.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that, Megan. Anybody else? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I just, Megan described it, I think, very well. The other thing I would add is that level 4 license under the framework is a fully licensed professional educators, so similar to like a CPL that we have now. And 5 and 6 were, I think, in a way to think about it in short form is like they're like add-on credentials. So obviously these teachers are going to be level 4, but these 5 and 6 licenses credentials would mean that they are certified then to step into these roles that Megan was describing at the district level. It doesn't mean that they would automatically get it. There has to be a position available, but it would mean that they are qualified based on the state standards to fill those roles at the district level. So I think a good way to think about them is like add-on credentials that are demonstrating, a higher level of skills at achieving what's outlined in the framework.
And not every level 4 teacher is going to even be interested in adding on those skills. The vast majority would probably, we were assuming would get to level 4 and stay there, and then continue to have to prove their effectiveness, but not be interested in moving out. And the other thing to emphasize that Megan said is that we really did want there to be some flexibility for districts in how to utilize those advanced teaching roles.
Yeah, and thank you all so much for kind of clarifying that for everybody and making sure we understand the vision of the Human Capital Roundtable as we develop these competencies. Just one more quick thing to add from our group. We were talking a little bit about the competencies that you really would see kind of spanning across the spectrum from level 2 all the way through level 6. And we were thinking that there's ways to kind of change the language a little bit so that you could see the progression of those. So at level 2, maybe teachers would be aware. At level 3, teachers would be demonstrating. At level 4, teachers would be consistently using, so that we can kind of see that progression of how those competencies would move across and grow as the teachers grow. Group 3, did you guys want to give us a quick synopsis of what you discussed?
So group 3 had very parallel discussions to the previous groups. One of the things that Melissa brought up as she talked about group 1 was kind of that the things that were in the tab 5 that maybe belong to the tab 6, and what distinguishes those two from that classroom excellence versus supporting the adult learners. And I think Jill, near the end of our discussion, brought up a really compelling point about the kind of the granularity of all of this work and all of our discussions today. We do see some things that are quite similar as we moved across each of these tabs. And I think, Maureen, your point a moment ago that we may need to use verbs to really discern the level of expectation, that it's helpful to hear that, because our thoughts were, this isn't quite there yet, and what does that mean? And what might it take to make sure that it's real clear what those adult learning expectations are versus those classroom excellence expectations, and are there strong, clear differences between them? So it's helpful, Maureen, to hear you mention that what we said in our group was we believe there probably is some future need to create a little more organization and clarity now that we've gotten this inventory of all these discrete pieces and we've sort of gotten them into their appropriate categories. Some additional fine tuning to really streamline and line up with those expectations of those license levels is still going to be necessary. We're on the path for where we need to go, but we're certainly not to a final product yet. So that was our conversation in our group, and I'll just invite anybody else in the group to add anything that I may have left out.
You covered it.
Okay, thanks so much, Group 3. And yeah, we absolutely are going to need to fine tune and streamline and make sure everything's in the correct place and correctly, we're stating things correctly. Also, just real quickly in the chat, Melissa asked a question. So to clarify, is there an expectation for every level 5 teacher to have demonstrated their ability to mentor teachers in addition to their ability to model for other teachers? Did someone from the Human Capital Roundtable want to take that just to make sure that we're all on the same wavelength thinking there on what that level 5 teacher, what the expectations would be?
I think level 5 was being envisioned as having a more direct impact on students.
So working, that would be a teacher who perhaps maybe just something as simple as has a larger number of kids in her class, or works with several other teachers directly in their classrooms, but not just one mentee, a group of teachers. But it was sort of more of a focus on that teacher being still in contact with students and doing their work there versus level 6, which was as an adult leader. I don't know, Jeff and Megan, did I say that properly?
I think that's right, Jill. That the level 5 teacher sort of has a much higher level skill in effective teaching and could take on additional teaching duties or higher student loads, while the level 6 would be the teacher of teachers, if you will. And the level 6 teacher, I think, would need to have a demonstrated ability or have demonstrated skills through the credentialing licensure process that they are able to effectively coach, mentor other adults.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that clarification. So we are at 3:00. So if anyone needs to drop off and honoring your time, please feel free to drop off. But if you're able to stay on for just a few more seconds so we can hear the feedback from group 4.
I don't know that we have anything substantively different. Felicia, is there anything you'd want to raise up to the group?
No, I think everyone covered it very well. Same conversation we had in our group as well.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Group 4. We appreciate that. So thank you all so much for the work that you did today. I think we're really starting to hone in on what those competencies are going to be and really clarifying what each one of these levels will look like. And so we really appreciate all of your work in helping us get to the best competencies to really push forward and change the way we're licensing teachers and serving our students in our classrooms in the state of North Carolina. So with that, if I could please get a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Kamnitz. And if I could get someone to second.
Second, Dee Grissett.
Thank you so much. All those in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
So with that now.
All right, the motion carries and the meeting is adjourned. Again, thank you all so much for your work. We really appreciate it, and we look forward to seeing you again next month.